Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today I want to complete our mental health series I'm going to finish it by doing depression and major depression. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, depression is a big thing for me. I've definitely had a ton of experience with it. I would say I have just as much experience with it as I do with anxiety over the years, and I was diagnosed with anxiety around the age of 14, and then I was diagnosed with depression around the age of 16. I do not specifically remember feeling any depression up until I was about 16 years old, and that was when it hit me. It was very weird being in high school and having it just hit you like that, and all of a sudden feeling like, I guess the main thing I was feeling is I was feeling like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't having anything going on like wanting to sleep all the time or being lethargic. A lot of people that have depression fall into a very kind of like non-motivated state, and they feel almost like they just can't tackle everyday things, and that's very common. And as a matter of fact, it's actually more common than not in people that have depression. However, the type of depression that I've always had has been the kind that actually does kind of the opposite. It makes me more motivated, and it makes me like want to work harder. I don't know, it's very hard for me to explain it. So it puts me in a position where I don't feel like I want to lay around. I don't feel like I want to be bored. I don't feel like I want to, I don't want to have nothing to do. I always want to have something to do. And especially if I'm in a depressed state, I want as much to do as I can put on my plate within reason. So definitely holding a full schedule for me is an important part of me keeping myself mentally healthy. And for some people, it's the opposite. Some people need a lot more downtime and just time of not really doing much of anything. But, so if I'm kind of just starting out from where, I was first initially noticing symptoms of depression, it did also kind of start out a little bit strong, I'm not gonna lie. I definitely had some things going on that were pretty upsetting and were pretty alarming for me. Nothing just like super bad, super crazy, but I definitely experienced a lot of feelings of worthlessness and feelings of not being good enough in general. And so that led to it led to a lot of things. And around this time, I was also experiencing, as a teenager, I was attempting to pursue a modeling career, which went well for a while, and this lasted for about 3 or 4 years of my teenage life. And it was hard on me because I naturally have an athletic build, an athletic body type, in which I tend to just not be as skinny as a lot of other girls. So I've always technically been considered a little bit overweight, even though I don't see myself that way, and I never really did. I've always been really healthy in my opinion, and having all that extra muscle on me, it was hard on me as well. So the depression would lead to me, skipping meals, borderline starving myself. I really do believe I was borderline anorexic there for a short period of time. But fortunately, after about the age of 16, I pretty much just gave up on the modeling career, and I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I'm going to move on with my life. And I don't know why it was that they insisted that I continue to keep losing weight, but that was just a part of my life, and that was very hard. So, similar to my anxiety, the depression was definitely very on and off throughout time, and it would cycle, come and go in phases, the same as the anxiety. Sometimes I would have both at the same time, still do, but usually more so one than the other. And at many times, one will be completely absent while I struggle with the other. And that's just the way it's always been. And so the symptoms never really changed over time. It would just come and go. And fortunately for me, the circumstances of my depression, if I experience an episode in which I am depressed, it is always circumstantial, meaning there is something that's gone on in my life that has led me to be upset and depressed. So therefore, it's got to be something really big. So unfortunately, my life has been full of such incidents, but I also see it as an amazingly great thing because it's led me to be the person I am today and to accomplish things that I have and continue to accomplish things. So it's really actually quite amazing. However, it's hard. Depression is a hard thing to deal with. And like I say, for most people, it puts them in a position of not being able to very well carry on in life. It puts them in a position of just kind of like standing still, so to speak, or living in a state in which they really just don't want to live. And I think the symptoms can vary. You can have mild symptoms where maybe you're just lethargic, or maybe you're just feeling a little down on yourself and things of that nature. Maybe you're turning to food and overeating and using food as a coping mechanism, or alcohol or drugs. Maybe you're getting into more moderate symptoms where it's really starting to affect your life. Maybe if you get to a point where you're having like major depressive symptoms like suicidal thoughts, ideations, things like just being really overcome by this immense feeling of sadness and emotion. And I think for me, that's always been a big thing too, is like when I'm in a depressive state, I will be very upset, like to the point of, if it's a really big thing, a really bad situation, then I will just like be so overcome with sadness, just like cry nonstop. And don't get me wrong, it has to be something pretty bad. It's not going to be just an everyday thing. So a few particular incidences in my life in which I will briefly talk about regarding depression and my experiences. So the first time, I talked about when I first started struggling with depression, and then just struggled on and off. And I think the worst time that I ever had with depression was right after the summer of 2018, when I was arrested for a crime I didn't commit, a violent crime that I was charged with. And I've mentioned this in several of my other videos. I've also done a video specifically on the incident of me being arrested on false allegations. And so that's an interesting one to look at. And so there was that. And, I was thrown in jail for 3 days for something I did not do. And the case, the charges were ultimately dropped a few months later, but this was after I had to spend $10,000 on a criminal defense attorney, and I had to, do all this stuff, and there was just no significant evidence that I committed the crime, which I knew in the first place, which is why I did not understand why I had been arrested for something I didn't do. And there was so much money that had to be dished out from this. I mean, it was like $5,000 just to get me out of jail, and that was only on a 10% because the judge, when he did my arraignment, he kind of just looked at me and he was like, wow. Like, he looked at me like I was a piece of scum because he didn't know that this was actually he just assumed, like everybody else, that I had actually committed this crime. I didn't have a chance to explain myself or anything at all. And so he was like, well, I'm going to post your bond at $50,000. I wanted to do 100, but since you're pregnant, we'll do 50. So, so I was pregnant when this happened. I was about 4.5 months, close to 5. And it was like the worst thing ever. And I have really bad PTSD to this day because of that. And that is the number one incident that has shaped, that I really think has shaped my life to this point. And it kind of brought out just like the overall corruption, honestly, of the justice system and the system in general. Very, very upsetting. I can't even begin to tell you what I felt. And it's kind of hard for me to do this video too, just like the one I did about the PTSD, because I have to kind of relive this. And so the reason I'm telling you this is because, you know, I want other people to see that they can make it out of this as well, and that I've been in some really, really rough situations and have come out of them a better, stronger person and much more, you know, honestly just happier with life. So during the 3 days that I was initially in jail, I was miserable. You know, not only was I denied a mat to sleep on, there was nothing but concrete, it was freezing cold. I was denied a change of clothes, a shower, like all this time, personal hygiene. I mean, it was so horrible. Like, it was disgusting. They did not clean the jail cell the whole time I was in there. There was another pregnant girl in there with me, and she was a lot further along. And I felt really, really bad for her. They had kept her in a holding cell for 7 weeks. And so during this time, I was stuck in this holding cell for 3 days because my bond was posted, so they didn't want to book me into the jail because they knew I was getting out. But I was held for 3 days. So, because they thought that I was a threat. And so this was even all the more depressing. So in my mind, I'm just thinking over and over, wow, like, I didn't do this, I didn't commit this crime, but yet I'm in jail, and yet I've been charged with this violent crime. How does this happen? And especially to me, you always think these things are never going to happen to you. You always think that will never happen to me. And then it does. And when something like that happens, it just really takes you aback. And then you're like, wow, look at me. Look at how awful I am. Look at how disgusting I am to have allowed such a thing to happen. Even though this was not my fault, and I did the very best I could at the time. Even though I knew, like, deep down, hey, you didn't do this. Like, it was the worst thing ever. And I think firmly, I've had a lot of bad things happen to me in my life, but this was by far the worst. So, you know, I'm sitting in there, I couldn't sleep. That's another thing for me, is when I get depression, I cannot sleep. Like, it's very, very hard to come by sleep at all for me when I'm in a very depressed state. Which, like I've said before, is a lot unlike most people, but it is fairly common for people to lose sleep while depressed as well. So another thing to consider. But, so upon getting out of jail a few days later, I felt a very, very minimal sense of hope at this point, but I was still in a really, really bad place. And this went on for a while. You know, I went about my life. I got myself involved in some groups. I was working. I was just staying really busy, you know, getting prepared for the baby and all of these things. And, you know, I was also single at the time, so that didn't help. And just feeling like I was a complete waste of life, a loser. Like, yeah, of course I felt suicidal. Of course I felt really, really bad about what I was going through. And it's just not something you hear about a lot. And I think it's important for people to also know that it's estimated that about 1% to 2% of people that are in prison are completely innocent. And it's likely more than that. So it's just an important thing for people to know. So sometimes I just randomly throw that in there because I feel like it. Because you can't always assume that somebody is guilty. And so police, I don't do well with police. After everything that's happened to me, I'm very, if I see a police car, if I see a police officer, my PTSD goes crazy. I feel my blood pressure go up, my heart rate goes up. It's not pretty. So I do anything and everything I can to avoid police, and I really hate the way that these situations have made me view the world and view people in general and law enforcement, etc. But unfortunately, that is what's happened. I don't believe that will ever change. So I guess where I'm getting with this is I've been through some really hard times, and during this period of time, a couple of months later, I found myself really, really depressed, crying so hard. And this was right before I had gotten a new apartment, because I was really branching out and really doing good for myself. And I was doing a great job, despite the fact that I was severely, severely depressed. And I was briefly seeing a therapist during this time, just because, I was going through such a horrible ordeal. And he was somewhat helpful. I mean, he's very caring, but in the long run, it wasn't really helping me a whole lot. So I only went to him probably about 5 or 6 times, and then I stopped going from there. But it did help a little bit. And I think therapy, if it helps you, I think that's great. I think it's so great if you can have something like that to help you. So ultimately, I found myself, and this was 2018, late summer, I found myself sitting in the parking lot of a hospital, and I had been working that day, and I had just kind of been like running errands, doing the everyday stuff I needed to do. But I was so depressed, and I was so upset. And at this point in time, I still did not know whether or not the charges would be dropped from me being, charged with this crime that I didn't commit. So at this point in time, I didn't know. And I was still really upset. I knew that I wasn't going to be facing really any jail time, just because my attorney that I had, she basically just gave me the rundown, and she was like, look, no matter what happens, you're not going to go to prison, you're not even going to go to jail. The worst case scenario is we can lower this down, and you would end up, on probation for some odd years. But, the crime that I was charged with, it was a 2nd-degree felony, and it was violent. So I just really hated myself, because this happened to me. I hated myself. I was disgusted. And so I'm sitting in the parking lot of a hospital, and I'm telling myself, I'm thinking about going in and like admitting myself to the hospital, because at this point I was so depressed and so upset. And because of this, I could not eat, I could not sleep, and I was pregnant, so of course that makes it way worse. I could hardly even drink, keep fluids down and stuff. And at this point, it wasn't that I was feeling suicidal that I was wanting to go into the hospital. It was the fact that I was so upset, and I was so depressed and so sad that this would happen, and that I would be living this life the way that I was. So what I did was, I sat there for probably about an hour, and eventually I grabbed my bag, I went inside, I went in through the lobby of the hospital. So I walked in there, and I kind of just walked around a little bit. I went to the bathroom, and this was kind of in the main foyer, the main part of the hospital, just kind of walked around for a minute, and then I kind of sat down on a bench, and I was on my phone, just kind of looking. And all of a sudden, I told myself, I was like, I need to get up and I need to go. I need to just go home. And as upset as I was, in that moment, I realized that, hey, if I admit myself into this hospital, I have to consider what's going to happen. How long am I going to be here? How long are they going to keep me? Do I want to be subject to having to take drugs? And there are so many things to consider, and I'll get into that in a minute, but these were the thoughts I was having, and these are just, I ultimately decided, hey, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go home, I'm going to work out, and I'm going to carry on with my day. I'm going to carry on with my week and all the other things that I have to do, because I didn't have the time or the ability or the resources to just check out of my life at that point. I have another son. He was 3 at this time. I was like, I need to take care of my child. I need to, just keep on what I'm doing and keep living and not just check out. And I felt like in that moment, I was like, okay, I can carry on. I can control this, and I'm going to be okay. one way or another, even though it wasn't okay. And it's okay to not be okay. And like I said before in some of my other videos, especially with the mental health series, is that everyone at some point in their life is going to experience depression, anxiety, or PTSD, if not two or all three. And in my opinion, I think most people will experience all three at some point in their life. You know, and there are also other things like insomnia, panic disorder, which is an anxiety disorder, panic attacks, so many things. And we need to understand that these are sadly normal parts of life, and it's a normal reaction to what we are experiencing. Yes, it's important that we manage it and try to keep it in check, but I have to be honest when I say that I don't think it's avoidable. I don't think that any person can avoid having mental health issues for the whole life, because it's just part of the life that we're living in. It's part of this matrix, the society, and I feel like society is always telling us, like, make sure you get help for your mental health, make sure that you get yourself help if you have mental health issues, this and that. And I don't even like to call it mental health issues, because yes, if you feel like you need help, you should get it, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I have nothing against that. What I can say is that I have fought through so much depression, mostly on my own, but in the end, what I can say about all of the times I've been depressed, and even the worst possible times, that every single time it was a friend that helped me dig myself out of that point, or it was God, it was even myself. It was never a therapist. It was never a medication. It was something else entirely. Or a spiritual awakening. It was, always something else. So, and this is just my experience. And then, I dealt with another really horrible bout of depression around the fall of 2019, winter of 2020. And that's a whole nother thing entirely that was also very, very horrible and traumatic. And that one was about the same. It was a very close second to the experience I had in which I had been arrested for that crime. So ultimately, in the end, what I can say about the things that have helped me the most is that staying busy has helped me more than anything. Having a good support system of friends, not necessarily family, because I know from personal experience that, family is not always going to be there, but the same goes with friends. Just people. Not necessarily family, not necessarily friends, but just people that will be there for you and that can help you, even if they're not physically there with you. Someone that you can talk to on the phone or FaceTime, even texting, whatever it is. And whatever it is you have to do to make yourself feel better within reason, just do it. If you have to work out, if you need to go for a run, I'm not going to recommend drugs or alcohol or anything like that, because obviously we know that's not good for managing, and that's a whole nother ball game and a whole nother bad situation that you don't want to get into. But whatever it is you feel like you need to do, if you need to take some time off work, if you need to go to the spa for a couple days, and obviously there are going to be times in which you feel very stuck and you feel like you cannot break free of what you're feeling, or you don't have the ability to break free of what you're feeling. And in those situations, you just have to do what you are able to and what you feel like you can. So with me, there have been many times over the years in which I have felt like I needed to get away, I needed to do something for myself and get my mental state back in check. And there were many times I was not really able to do that. So I would just do the best that I could. So health can have to do with depression, it's a very wide range of certain nutrients that can help you with that. So there are other things that can be really beneficial, like omega-3 fatty acids, 6 and 9, a lot of, homeopathic remedies. Like, the list really goes on. You'd really just have to do your own research and figure out what it is that you would want to experiment with when it comes to different supplements that you can take. But I have tried anything and everything out there, and magnesium is a huge one as well. I always take magnesium no matter what. Just eating healthy, exercising, things I always talk about, staying hydrated, plenty of water, but yet keeping your electrolytes in check in a healthy way, not by drinking a ton of Gatorade or Powerade, because that's not a very healthy way to ultimately long-term hydrate yourself. So, supplementing yourself with the right nutrients for your body. You have to know your body, and it goes a lot further than just a physical level, and a lot of times, your sleep quality can play a role, and I've definitely been there because I am an insomniac. I've experienced so much sleep trouble over the years, even from the age of 2, because those are some of my first memories as a child, is having trouble sleeping. So I think that, just doing the best that you can, though. Maximizing the sleep that you are getting, even if you're not getting much at all, and just learning how to cope with that, and learning how to cope in general. Meditation, things that are going to aid you in your health. It's just such a broad spectrum of things that can help you. Crystals, essential oils, lemongrass is particularly good for depression. Lemongrass, lime, any kind of citrus, lemon oil, frankincense. These are just a few really good oils for depression. Eucalyptus, spearmint, wintergreen, minty ones, very good for depression. There are many, many things that can help you with this. So, in the end, I think the most important thing that people can hopefully take away from my personal experiences is that there is no shame in getting help. If you need to go to a crisis center, if you need to go to a hospital, or even if, you're not in a crisis and you just need to go see a therapist, or, even if you want to take medication, that's okay. I have taken medication before when I first was diagnosed with depression. I think I took, same with the anxiety, it was kind of on and off. Like, I'd take a little bit for 6 months to a year, get off of it. I might take it again for a few months, get off of it. But in the end, whatever you have to do is what you have to do. And you're going to know what's right for you. You have to look within yourself and decide, what's going to be the best approach for me. And a treatment approach is not always going to be from a Western medicine standpoint. It will not always be, hey, I need to take this medication and go see this therapist twice a week. It will not always be that. And the most important thing I think a person can do when they're struggling with depression is look at it from a very wide lens, and look at it in terms of, what can I do that's outside the box? Because, the professionals will tell us that once you have depression, and the same with anxiety or whatever, they're just like, well, you can't cure it. You're always going to have it. You might just not feel it for a while, but you're always going to have it. I don't believe that that's necessarily true. I really don't. And, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. And I tell you guys this all the time. But I do firmly believe that if you find the right treatment approach for anything, mental or physical health, you can cure it and get rid of it and stay rid of it. It's just a matter of experimentation. It's a matter of not taking a one-size-fits-all approach, because each human is not a one-size-fits-all approach on any level. We're all so vastly different, and I wish that more people could understand this, but they don't. So, whatever you need to do, and, when we're talking about a holistic standpoint, I have been medication-free entirely since 2013. It is now 2021. So, I feel I've done a really, really good job. And I have been so strong throughout all this, but I really feel like digging deep down into your emotions when you are depressed, understanding what is making you depressed, is the first step. Once you understand what it is, maybe there are multiple things, then from there you decide, okay, what am I going to do about it? What can I do about it? What can I change? What can I not change? And what I can't change, how can I make it easier to live with? And these are really the things that you have to do, and the hard questions that you have to ask yourself, because the worst thing that you can do is avoid it or try to suppress it with drugs or a prescription pill, or try to suppress it with alcohol or something else, particularly an unhealthy coping mechanism. And the thing, that I want to mention too is, initially, if you're in a crisis, I think medication can be really helpful on a mental health level. However, I do want to point out that a lot of studies have shown that people that take these drugs long term can actually develop trouble in regulating their mental health in the future without medication, causing them to need to increase their doses likely and things of that nature. So I think it's really helpful if you want to take a medication short term, but I don't feel that it should ever be a long-term solution. And this is just my opinion. I'm not downing anyone that's been on this long term, because you got to do what you got to do, especially when it comes to survival. But there are a lot of other ways that you can help more naturally, balance out your serotonin and balance out things that are going on. So I was definitely struggling with major depression for at least a few times in my life, if not more, and a few that I can definitely very vividly remember. And it was very, very horrible for me. It was very much like hell. And like I said before, I was not in my bed, knocked down, not doing anything. I was very functional during this time, doing anything and everything I could do, but yet I was a mess inside. I was miserable. I was so fed up and so upset with myself. And you also have to analyze the people around you, okay? If you're surrounded by people, assholes, people that are treating you poorly, people that are not, especially if it's a significant other, maybe it's somebody you live with, whatever the situation is, if there's something going on like that, you have to evaluate the situation and be like, okay, if this person is causing me to feel this way about myself, I have got to distance myself from this person. Maybe, go further than that, and not just distance yourself, maybe eliminate yourself from this person's presence entirely, and maybe that might help. So overall, I'm not going to go into detail about every single experience I've had, because that would take me all day, and I don't have time for that. So these are just the main experiences that I've had. I have definitely been, just to recap everything here before I finish up, I have been through the very, very lowest of low kind of depression in my life. And I have been to the brink of, this is it, I'm not going to make it anymore. I've been to the brink of that moment where you don't know if you're going to walk another step or not. And it's a very scary place to be. I also want to tell you that it's a very common place to be. And what people don't tell you is a lot of people don't talk about this. Most people that I have talked to in my life about these things have told me that they too have felt the same way, if not once, many times over. And it's not just about feeling like you're at your end and you cannot go on. It's not just about feeling, maybe having suicidal ideation or anything like that. It's about a lot of different things. It's about a lack of quality of life. It's about a lack of motivation, a desire to not continue on further in a normal way. But what is really normal anyway? So in order to thrive and live your best life, you just have to do the best that you can. You have to analyze yourself, okay? First and foremost, the most important thing, you have to analyze yourself in your life and figure out what you can do, and you have to take action. You have to take action. And from that point, you can begin to heal. do other things that you can, get into your routine to help you. Natural things, maybe it is a medication. Maybe you can take something low dose or something that's going to give you the best possible result and the best quality of life. When I was on medication, I experienced a lot of different things I did not like, including the symptom I disliked the most was being tired and feeling lethargic. And as a depressed person, you really just don't want that. So I would also experience things like, lack of libido. Things would be just kind of off, and sometimes my mind just felt like it wasn't working right, brain fog, and there were a lot of things. Appetite suppression, when your appetite's already suppressed. So yeah, and the same goes with the anxiety, because the same medication I took for anxiety was the same thing I took for depression. So that's really all I have to say about that, and I'm not anti-medication. I don't want people to think that I'm anti-medication, because I am not. But what I am for, I stand for finding the best approach to you by, hopefully ultimately a natural, holistic standpoint. And I think if we can get to know ourselves and our worth intimately getting to know yourself and understand who you really are and what you're really here for, is the most important thing when it comes to healing depression, and hopefully making yourself more resilient in the long run, so that when you do feel another episode coming, if you even ever do, that you're going to be much better prepared for it. You're going to be so much better off, and your life is going to improve tremendously. So, not saying that, you may never get depressed again. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying I will never get depressed again, because, I probably will at some point. But so will everybody else, probably. So, anyways, I hope this video helps. It's kind of hard for me to talk about these things, and I kind of ramble, but I hope you get the gist of what I have been trying to say, and I appreciate you listening in, and I'll see you in the next video, and we'll talk more. I hope you guys have enjoyed this mental health series, and I will be coming up with some ideas for some more series that we can do. And if you have any ideas, reach out to me on one of my social media platforms, other than YouTube, because I don't keep my comments on, because people have made very rude comments in the past, and I just don't want to deal with it. So thanks guys, love you, bye.